4 years after his wife died, a billionaire returned to the house he'd abandoned, expecting silence and dust. Instead, he found lights on, dinner cooking, a family living in his grief. And the woman standing in his kitchen said two words that changed everything. "I know." She knew it was his house. She knew about his dead wife. She'd known from the very beginning. What he didn't know, what would destroy him when he finally learned the truth, was that his wife had planned this, all of it, from beyond the grave. This is the story of a man who tried to turn his home into a tomb, and the strangers who broke in and forced him to live again. But before we begin, do me one favor. If this story makes you feel something, anything, in the next 30 minutes, if it breaks your heart or gives you hope or makes you think about someone you've lost, leave a comment. Just one word. Any word that captures what you felt. Because these stories, they're not just for entertainment. They're for people who need to know they're not alone in their grief, their fear, their impossible choices. So stick with me. This one's going to hurt. But I promise, it's worth it. Pause. Now, let me tell you what happened the night Calder Rowan came home. The lights were on. That was the first thing Calder Rowan noticed when he pulled through the iron gates after 4 years of absence. Not the overgrown hedges, not the way the driveway had cracked along its seams, just the lights, warm, yellow, impossible, glowing from windows that should have been dark. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Someone was inside his house. He sat there for a moment, engine idling, staring at the place he'd sworn he would never return to. The house looked wrong. Not decayed, not abandoned. It looked alive. Smoke curled from the chimney. The porch light flickered like it always had, that loose connection he'd never bothered to fix. Even from here, he could see movement through the kitchen window. A shadow passing. Human. Real. Calder's pulse hammered in his throat. He'd left this place locked. Sealed. A tomb for everything he couldn't bear to lose twice. And now someone had broken in. Someone was living in the space his wife had died dreaming of growing old in. He killed the engine. The silence that followed felt like drowning. Pause. When he finally stepped out of the car, the night air hit him. Cool, pine-scented, exactly as he remembered. His feet crunched on gravel that shouldn't have been raked clean. The walkway stones were swept. The porch had been swept too. Everything about this was wrong, and yet the door wasn't locked. It opened under his hand before he could decide whether to knock or kick it in. And that's when he smelled it. Garlic. Butter. Something baking. Someone was cooking in his kitchen. Calder moved through the entryway on autopilot, his mind splitting into two tracks, rage building in his chest, and something else, something quieter, more dangerous, that whispered, "The house feels warm again." He shoved that thought down hard. The living room hit him first. Toys scattered across the rug his wife had chosen. A child's drawing taped to the wall where their wedding photo used to hang. Books stacked on the coffee table. A blanket draped over the couch. His couch, still holding the shape of someone who'd just stood up. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind him. Female. Calm. Too calm. Calder turned. A woman stood in the kitchen doorway, a dish towel in her hands. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that looked tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. She wasn't startled. She wasn't afraid. She was looking at him like he was the intruder. "Who the hell are you?" Calder's voice came out low, controlled, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. "I'm Nell." She didn't move. "I live here." The words landed like a slap. "You... what?" "I live here," she repeated, and there was something in her tone, not defiance exactly, but a weary kind of certainty that made Calder's anger spike higher. "This is my house." "I know." Those two words changed everything. 4 years earlier, Calder Rowan had been a different man. Successful, certainly. Wealthy beyond most people's comprehension. But those things had never defined him. What defined him was Elena, his wife, his center, the only person who'd ever made him feel like something other than a transaction. They'd bought this house together, secluded, private, 40 acres of forest and silence. Elena had loved it immediately. She'd walked through every room with her hands trailing along the walls, already seeing what it could become. "We'll grow old here," she'd said. "We'll fill it with life." She'd been gone 3 months later. Cancer. Fast. The kind that didn't negotiate or offer second chances. Calder had held her hand in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and defeat, and she'd made him promise, that he wouldn't disappear into grief, that he'd keep living. He'd lied. The day after her funeral, he'd locked the house and walked away. Didn't take anything but his wallet and his phone. Left everything else exactly as it was. Her coffee cup still in the sink. Her book still on the nightstand. Bookmark holding a page she'd never finish. He'd told himself it was temporary. That he'd come back when he was ready. 4 years passed. He lived in hotels, penthouses, places with no memory and no weight. He worked obsessively, drowning in mergers and acquisitions and the kind of high-stakes negotiations that required every ounce of focus. He ate when reminded, slept when exhausted. Existed in the narrow space between functional and alive. And he never, ever let himself think about the house. Except now he was standing in it, and a stranger was telling him she knew it was his. Deep breath. "Then you know you're trespassing." Calder pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm calling the police." "Mr. Rowan." "Don't." He held up a hand. "Don't say my name like you know me." Nell's jaw tightened. For the first time, he saw something flicker in her expression. Not fear, but something close to it. Desperation, maybe. The kind that made people do reckless things. "We had nowhere else to go." "Not my problem. I have 2 daughters." Calder's thumb hovered over the screen. He didn't look up. "Then you should have thought about that before breaking into someone else's house." "Mommy?" The small voice came from the stairs. Calder's head snapped up. A girl stood on the landing, maybe 7 years old. Dark eyes, blonde hair tangled from sleep. She was wearing pajamas covered in stars, and she was looking at him with an expression that made his stomach drop. She wasn't afraid of him. She looked sad. "Sky, go back to bed," Nell said, her voice suddenly sharp. But Sky didn't move. She came down the stairs slowly, her hand trailing along the banister, and walked right up to Calder. "You came back," she said quietly. The words hit him like a punch. "Sky," Nell started. "She said you would." Sky tilted her head, studying him. "She said it would take a long time, but you'd come back when you were ready." Calder's throat closed. Who said that? But he already knew. His wife. Somehow, impossibly, his dead wife had orchestrated this. Calder didn't call the police. He told himself it was because it was late. Because waking his lawyer at midnight would create complications. Because forcibly removing a woman and 2 children in the middle of the night would be messy. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. The house felt wrong to destroy. He'd spent 4 years preserving it as a monument to loss, and now it was full of life. Cooking smells and children's laughter and the soft sound of someone humming in another room. Calling the police would shatter that, would return it to silence. And Calder wasn't sure he could survive the silence again, so he stayed. He told Nell she had 24 hours to explain herself and find somewhere else to go. Then he claimed the couch, his couch in his living room, and pretended to sleep while his mind raced. Sky had gone back upstairs without argument, but not before looking at him one more time with those unsettling, knowing eyes. "She said you would come back." Elena. Calder lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how this was possible. Elena had been meticulous about their affairs, every detail planned, every contingency considered. But she'd never mentioned anything about letting strangers live in their house. He would have remembered that. He would have fought it. Unless she'd hidden it from him, unless she'd known, he would fight it. The thought made him feel hollow. Around 3 a.m., he heard footsteps on the stairs. Soft, careful. Someone trying not to wake him. He kept his eyes closed. The footsteps moved through the living room, paused near the couch, then continued toward the kitchen. Water running. The quiet clink of a glass being set down. Then nothing. Calder waited. The footsteps didn't return. Curious despite himself, he sat up. The house was dark except for a thin strip of light under the kitchen door. He moved quietly, years of executive boardrooms having taught him how to enter a space without announcing himself. Nell was sitting at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. She wasn't crying. She was just sitting there, defeated, exhausted. The kind of tired that came from carrying weight too heavy for one person. Calder recognized it because he'd seen it in his own mirror for 4 years. He started to back away. This felt too intimate, too invasive, but she spoke without looking up. "I'm not a criminal." He froze. "I know how this looks," she continued, her voice rough. "I know what you think of me, but I'm not. I didn't break in to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" Nell finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Because a lawyer contacted me 6 months ago, said there was a housing program for widows with children, temporary placement in homes that were sitting empty. She swallowed hard. "We were living in a motel, me and my daughters, rotating between 3 different locations because we couldn't afford to stay in one place more than a week." Calder said nothing. "My husband died 2 years ago. Sudden. Heart attack at 38. No warning. No life insurance because we were young and stupid and thought we had time." Her laugh was bitter. "I sold everything. Worked 3 jobs. It wasn't enough. Sky was sleeping in the car half the time. The baby..." Her voice cracked. "The baby got sick because we couldn't afford heat. So you took my house." "I took a chance," Nell shot back, some fire returning. "I took the only option I had that didn't involve putting my daughters in foster care." The words hung between them. "The lawyer said the house was abandoned," she continued quieter. "Said the owner hadn't been here in years. That the trust was set up specifically for situations like mine. Widows. Children. Nowhere else to go." Trust. That word detonated in Calder's chest. "What trust?" Nell blinked. The one your wife set up. Before she..." She stopped, seeing his expression. "You didn't know?" No, he didn't, but he was going to find out. Calder's lawyer arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a leather portfolio and an expression that told Calder everything before a single word was spoken. "You knew about this." It wasn't a question. Marcus Chen had been handling Calder's legal affairs for 15 years. He was brilliant, discreet, and loyal to a fault. He was also, apparently, capable of keeping devastating secrets. "Elena made me promise," Marcus said simply. "She set up the trust 3 months before she died. Buried it deep in your estate planning. She knew you'd never agree to it if she told you directly." They were standing in the driveway. Inside, Calder could hear Nell moving around, probably trying to give them privacy, probably terrified. Good. She should be. What exactly does this trust say? Marcus opened the portfolio. That in the event of your extended absence from the property, a qualified family could be granted temporary residence. Widowed parent with minor children. Specific financial need parameters. Maximum occupancy of 2 years. 2 years? With option to renew under certain conditions. Calder felt his control cracking. What conditions? Marcus hesitated. That hesitation told Calder more than any document could. If you return, Marcus said carefully, and choose to allow continued occupancy, the trust converts to permanent residence. The house becomes theirs. The world tilted. Elena gave away my house. She gave you a choice, Marcus corrected. The trust only activates if you come back and decide to let them stay. If you evict them now, it dissolves. The house remains yours, but if you— I would never— She thought you might. Those 4 words landed like a blade between ribs. Calder stared at the house, at the smoke still curling from the chimney, at the kitchen window where he could see Skye sitting at the table, coloring something with intense concentration. She was trying to save you, Marcus said quietly. She told me she was terrified you'd lock yourself away, that you'd turn this place into a tomb and yourself into a ghost. She wanted to make sure that couldn't happen. By forcing strangers into my home, by forcing you to choose life over preservation. Pause. Calder wanted to rage, to throw Marcus out, to burn the trust documents and send Nell and her daughters packing that instant. But he couldn't. Because somewhere deep in the fury, underneath the betrayal, was a horrible, creeping realization. Elena had been right. He had turned into a ghost. And maybe she'd known the only way to pull him back was to make staying alone impossible. "How long have they been here?" he asked finally. 4 months. And you didn't tell me. You didn't ask. You never asked about the house, Calder. Not once in 4 years. That truth hurt worse than anything else. Marcus closed the portfolio. You have options, legal options. But Elena's will is airtight. If you fight this, it'll take years and cost you more than money. And at the end of it all, he met Calder's eyes. You'll still be alone. After Marcus left, Calder stood in the driveway for a long time. He could hear sounds from inside, a child laughing, Nell's voice, gentle and tired, saying something he couldn't make out. The house was alive with them. He'd spent 4 years keeping it dead. The question was, which version destroyed him more? 3 days passed. Calder didn't leave. He didn't officially stay either. He existed in a strange, liminal space, sleeping on the couch, eating meals in silence while Nell cooked, watching Skye move through the rooms like she'd always lived there. Because she had lived there. For 4 months. Long enough to know which floorboards creaked, which cabinet held the plates, where the light switches were in the dark. She knew his house better than he did now. That realization made something twist in his chest. On the 4th morning, he found Skye in Elena's music room. The door had been closed when he arrived. He'd assumed, hoped it had stayed that way. But now it stood open, and Skye was inside, carefully wiping dust from the piano keys with a cloth. Calder froze in the doorway. "You shouldn't be in here." Skye didn't startle. She just kept cleaning, methodical and gentle. "It was dusty." "I don't care." "She would have." The words hit him like a fist. Skye finally looked up. "She wouldn't want it dusty. She'd want it ready." "Ready for what?" "For when you're ready to hear it again." Calder's hands clenched at his sides. Get out. Okay. Sky set down the cloth, but she didn't move immediately. Instead, she looked at him with those two old eyes. You're scared. I'm angry. You're scared, she repeated calmly, of staying and of leaving. My mom says sometimes being scared makes people mean, but you're not really mean, you're just sad. Something in Calder's chest cracked. Sky! Nell appeared behind him, breathless. I'm sorry, she wanders. Sky, come on. Now. But Sky was still looking at Calder. Do you want us to leave? The question hung there, simple and devastating. Did he? He'd spent 3 days trying to decide, 3 days watching this family exist in his space, 3 days feeling the house breathe again. I don't know, he said finally. Honestly. Sky nodded like that was the answer she'd expected. Then she walked past him, pausing to touch his hand briefly, just a light pressure of small fingers, before following her mother out. Calder stood alone in the music room. The piano gleamed. He'd forgotten how beautiful it was. That night, Nell found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m. We need to talk, she said. Calder didn't disagree. They sat at opposite ends of the table. The baby monitor between them crackled with static and the soft sound of a toddler sleeping. How much did you know? Calder asked. About me? About the trust? About my wife? Nell didn't flinch from the question. The lawyer told me the house belonged to a widower who hadn't returned in years, that his wife had set up provisions for families like mine. That's it. Did you know my name? A pause. Yes. Did you know I was alive? Yes. And you moved in anyway? Yes. Nell met his eyes. Because my daughters needed a home, and I needed to believe someone, somewhere, understood what it meant to be desperate. So you used my grief. I shared your grief, she cut him off, voice sharp. Don't you dare act like you're the only one who lost everything. My husband died on a Tuesday. Collapsed in the driveway while taking out the trash. I performed CPR until the ambulance came. They worked on him for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of watching them try to restart his heart while my daughters asked me when Daddy was going to wake up. Her voice cracked, but didn't break. So yes, I knew whose house this was. I knew you'd lost your wife. And I thought, I hoped, that maybe someone who understood loss would understand why I had to take this chance, even if you never came back. But I did come back. You did. Nell's expression softened slightly. Why? It was a fair question. One Calder had been asking himself. I don't know, he admitted. 4 years of nothing, and then one day I just got in the car, drove here, didn't decide to, just did. Elena's anniversary? He startled. How did you... The date on the stone in the garden. Nell's voice went gentle. Sky found it. She's been leaving flowers there. Something in Calder's throat closed. They sat in silence for a long moment. I can't do this, Calder said finally. I can't watch you build a life here. In this house. With my... He stopped. It's too much. Then tell us to leave. I can't do that either. Why not? Because the house felt alive again. Because Sky looked at him like he mattered. Because the smell of coffee in the morning and the sound of footsteps overhead and the weight of other people existing in his space was both torture and relief. Because he was so tired of being alone. But he couldn't say any of that. I need time, he said instead. Nell nodded. How much time? I don't know. Then we'll wait. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. But it was something. Maybe it was enough. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became a month. Calder stopped sleeping on the couch. Nell offered him the guest room, his own guest room, which felt absurd, and he took it. Not because he'd accepted the situation, but because his back couldn't handle another night on century-old cushions. The house developed routines. Breakfast at 7. Nell cooked. Calder made coffee. Skye set the table with careful precision, folding napkins the way Elena used to. The toddler, whose name was Mira, he'd learned, threw Cheerios and laughed when they bounced. It was domestic, normal, horrifying. And slowly, incrementally, Calder began to exist again. He started eating full meals instead of coffee and silence. Started sleeping more than 4 hours a night. Started noticing things, the way morning light fell through the kitchen windows, the sound of rain on the roof, the weight of actual hunger instead of just the absence of fullness. He started very carefully, living. Skye noticed first. "You smiled today," she said one afternoon, appearing beside him while he worked on his laptop at the kitchen table. "Did I?" "At Mira, when she tried to eat her sock." Calder's mouth twitched. That was objectively funny. "See? You're doing it again." Skye climbed into the chair next to him. "Mom says you're defrosting." "I'm what?" "Like chicken. When you take it out of the freezer and it's all hard and you can't do anything with it. But then you leave it out, and eventually it gets soft again, and you can cook it." Calder stared at her. "Did your mother really compare me to frozen chicken?" Skye shrugged. "She said it nicer." "But yes." Despite himself, Calder laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. Skye smiled. "There. That's better." She slid off the chair and wandered away, leaving Calder sitting there, something warm and uncomfortable blooming in his chest. The shift happened gradually, then all at once. Calder found himself fixing the loose porch step he'd been ignoring for years, replacing the burned-out bulb in the hallway, teaching Skye how to identify different bird calls when they sat on the back deck in the evenings. He had conversations with Nell that went beyond logistics, learned that she'd been a teacher before her husband died, that she'd loved it but couldn't afford childcare on a teacher's salary alone. That Skye was brilliant and fierce and sometimes scared Nell with how much she saw. "She's been through too much too young," Nell said one night. They were cleaning up after dinner, another routine that had formed without discussion. "She had to grow up so fast after her dad died. I wish I could have protected her from that." "You did protect her," Calder said. "You're here." Nell looked at him, surprised. "I mean," he struggled to find words. "You did what you had to do to keep them safe. That's protection." "Even if it meant lying to you?" The question caught him off guard. "You didn't lie," he said slowly. "You just didn't tell me everything." "Is there a difference?" He thought about Elena, about the trust she'd hidden, about the life she'd engineered from beyond the grave. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm still figuring that out." Nell nodded, then quietly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not throwing us out." Calder didn't have a response to that. Because the truth was becoming increasingly clear. He wasn't letting them stay out of obligation or guilt or even memory of his wife. He was letting them stay because he didn't want them to go. And that terrified him more than anything. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. Skye collapsed during breakfast. One moment she was eating toast, the next she was on the floor, convulsing, her eyes rolled back. Nell screamed. Calder moved on instinct. He scooped Skye into his arms. She was so light, impossibly light, and ran for his car. Nell grabbed Mira and followed. The drive to the hospital was a blur of speed and prayer, and Skye's small body seizing against his chest in the back seat, while Nell held her and begged her to stay. Voice cracks. They'd been living in his house for 6 weeks. He'd known Sky for 6 weeks. It felt like he'd known her forever. The doctors stabilized her. Seizure, unknown cause. They'd need to run tests. Calder stood in the hallway while they worked, his hands shaking, his shirt stained with coffee from where Sky had knocked over her cup when she fell. Nell sat against the wall, Mira asleep in her arms, tears running silently down her face. "She's going to be okay," Calder said. He didn't know if it was true, but he needed to say it. Nell nodded without looking at him. Hours passed. When the doctor finally emerged, she explained that Sky had a previously undiagnosed epileptic condition, manageable with medication, but she'd need regular monitoring, expensive monitoring. Nell's face went white. "I'll take care of it," Calder said immediately. "All of it, whatever she needs." The doctor nodded and left. Nell finally looked at him. "You don't have to—" "Yes," Calder said firmly. "I do." Because somewhere in the last 6 weeks, Sky had stopped being a stranger's child living in his house. She'd become his to protect. When they finally let him see her, Sky was awake, pale but smiling. "Hi," she whispered. Calder sat beside her bed. "Hi. I scared you." "Yes. Sorry. Don't apologize." He took her small hand carefully. "Just don't do that again." "I'll try." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "Are you going to leave now?" The question split him open. "No," he said. "I'm not going to leave." And in that moment, he meant it. Sky smiled and closed her eyes. Calder sat there holding her hand and realized with devastating clarity that he'd just made a promise he couldn't break. He'd just chosen them. The envelope arrived 3 days after Sky came home from the hospital. Plain Manila. No return address. Left in their mailbox. His mailbox, by someone who knew exactly where they lived. Calder found it when he went to get the mail, something he'd started doing as part of the strange domestic rhythm they'd fallen into. Bills, mostly. A few catalogs. Nothing unusual, except the envelope. His name was typed on the front, just his name, nothing else. He opened it standing at the end of the driveway. Inside, a folder. Documents, legal papers he recognized from his own estate planning, and a transcript of a voicemail message. His hands started shaking before he finished reading the first page. The trust documents showed everything Marcus had told him. But there was more. Details Marcus hadn't mentioned. Or maybe details Calder hadn't been ready to hear. The trust didn't just allow a family to live in the house. It recruited them. Elena had left instructions with 3 different law firms. Criteria for finding the right family, widowed mother, young children, specific financial circumstances. They'd vetted Nell for 6 months before contacting her. This wasn't random. This wasn't chance. Elena had chosen Nell, or at least had created a system designed to find someone exactly like her, and Nell had known. The voicemail transcript was worse. It was from the lawyer who'd contacted Nell, dated 8 months ago before she moved in. The message was clinical, professional, and devastatingly clear. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Lawrence Webb from the Rowan Estate Trust. I'm contacting you regarding a unique housing opportunity. The property is currently unoccupied but maintained by a trust established by the late Elena Rowan. Her husband, Calder Rowan, has not returned to the residence in over 3 years. Mrs. Rowan anticipated this possibility and created provisions specifically for women in your situation. The house is yours for 2 years, with possibility of permanent residence should Mr. Rowan return and choose to allow it. We believe this arrangement could benefit all parties. Mr. Rowan is a private man dealing with complicated grief, You would be providing life to a space that desperately needs it. In return, you receive stability and safety for your children. I should note, Mr. Rowan is unaware of these arrangements. Should he return, you'll need to navigate that situation carefully. The transcript continued, but Calder stopped reading. His vision blurred with rage. Nell had known. From the very beginning, Nell had known this was a setup, that Calder was the target of his own wife's elaborate emotional manipulation, that every moment of the past 6 weeks, the careful routines, the growing attachment, Sky's quiet observations, all of it had been built on lies. Deep breath. He walked back to the house in a daze. Nell was in the kitchen preparing lunch. Sky was at the table with Mira, both of them coloring. They looked up when he entered. Sky's expression changed immediately. "Mr. Calder?" He ignored her, looked straight at Nell. "We need to talk. Now." Nell saw the envelope. Her face went pale. "Sky, take your sister upstairs," she said quietly. "But now." Sky gathered Mira and left, but not before looking back at Calder with something that might have been fear or might have been guilt. When they were alone, Calder threw the documents on the table. "You knew." It wasn't a question. Nell stared at the papers. "Yes." That single word detonated everything. "From the beginning?" "Yes." "You knew about the trust, about my wife, about the fact that this was all designed to manipulate me into—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "To save you," Nell said quietly. "Not to manipulate you. To save you." "That's not your decision to make." "No." She met his eyes. "It was Elena's decision, and mine was to take the chance she offered. By lying to me, I never lied to you. You never told me the truth." "Would you have listened?" Nell's voice rose to match his. "Would you have let us stay if you'd known? If I'd shown up on your doorstep and said, 'Your dead wife arranged for my family to invade your home because she thought it would fix you'? Would you have said yes?" Calder said nothing, because they both knew the answer. "I did what I had to do to protect my daughters," Nell continued, voice shaking. "I took the only option that didn't involve losing them. Was it perfect? No. Was it honest? Maybe not completely. But it was survival, Calder. And I won't apologize for that. You used me. We helped each other." She stepped closer. "You think this was easy? Living in the house of a man who might come back any day and destroy the only stability my children have had in 2 years? Watching Sky get attached to you while knowing you might leave? I was terrified every single day." "Then why not tell me?" "Because you weren't ready." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Sky said the same thing," Nell continued more gently. "She wanted to tell you weeks ago, but I told her to wait. That you needed time to remember how to live first. That if we told you too soon, you'd run. So you manipulated me. We gave you space." Nell's eyes were wet now. "We gave you time to see that living here, with us, wasn't betraying your wife. That it was honoring her. Because this—" She gestured around the kitchen. "This is what she wanted. For you to not be alone. For this house to be a home again." Calder's hands were shaking. "You don't get to tell me what my wife wanted. She told me herself." The world stopped. "What?" Nell's voice dropped to a whisper. "There was a video. The lawyer showed it to me before I moved in. Elena recorded it. She explained everything. Why she was doing this. What she hoped would happen. She said—" Nell swallowed hard. "She said if her plan worked, and you came back, and you let us stay, then you'd found a way to live again. and that was all she wanted. Pause. Calder felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. Elena had planned this, all of it, had looked into the future from her hospital bed and orchestrated this exact moment. And he hated her for it, hated her for being right, for knowing him so well, for loving him enough to wound him this deeply. "Get out," he said finally. "You have 24 hours. Then I want you gone." Nell flinched but nodded. "Okay. And don't," his voice cracked, "don't try to change my mind." "I won't." She left the kitchen. Calder stood there alone, surrounded by evidence of his wife's betrayal and his own stupidity, and felt something inside him finally, irreparably break. He'd let himself hope, and hope, as it turned out, was still the most dangerous thing in the world. Calder drove. He didn't know where he was going. Just away. Away from the house. Away from Nell's wounded eyes. Away from Sky's guilt. Away from the ghost of his wife still orchestrating his life from beyond the grave. He drove until the sun set, until the gas tank neared empty, until he found himself parked outside Elena's grave. He hadn't been here since the funeral. The stone was simple, elegant, her name, her dates, nothing else. Except fresh flowers, wildflowers, specifically, the kind that grew in the woods behind the house, the kind Sky would have picked. Sky's been leaving flowers there. Nell's words echoed in his memory. Calder sat down on the grass beside his wife's grave and finally, for the first time in 4 years, let himself cry. Not the controlled, silent grief he'd carried, but ugly, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deeper than pain, from the place where love lived before it learned to protect itself. "I can't do this," he said to the stone, to Elena, to the universe. "I can't be what you wanted. I'm not strong enough." The only answer was wind through the trees. He stayed there until full dark, until the cemetery closed and the groundskeeper politely asked him to leave. Then he sat in his car in the empty parking lot and finally opened the file the lawyer had sent. The voicemail transcript was there, but there was something else, too, a video file on a thumb drive. Calder plugged it into his phone. Elena appeared on screen. She looked exactly as he remembered, thin from illness, eyes bright with fever and certainty, sitting in their bedroom. His bedroom, 4 months before she died. Deep breath. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice cracked him open. "If you're watching this, then my plan worked. You came home, and you found the family I chose for you. I hope, God, I hope you didn't hate me too much for it." She smiled, that sad, knowing smile he'd loved. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I manipulated you. I lied. I set up this elaborate thing without your permission. And you're probably thinking this is the worst betrayal, the ultimate violation of trust. But Calder, you were dying." "Not physically, but you were disappearing. Even before I got sick, you were shrinking into yourself. And I knew that when I died, you'd finish the job. You'd lock yourself away in that house we bought together and you'd turn it into a museum. You'd preserve everything exactly as it was, and you'd stop living. I couldn't let that happen. So I found a loophole. A way to force life back into that house, even if you weren't ready for it. I found lawyers who would find the right family, someone who needed what you had. Someone who could remind you that life continues even after loss. Nell and her daughters, you've met them by now, I hope. They weren't random. I created criteria. Widowed mother, young children, financial need. But more than that, someone who would fight. Someone who wouldn't let you wallow. someone who understood grief but refused to surrender to it. I chose them for you, the way you chose me all those years ago. Elena leaned forward, and for a moment, it felt like she was looking directly at him. Here's what I need you to understand. This isn't about replacing me. It's about replacing the version of you that thinks love is something you only get once, that thinks connection is betrayal, that thinks being alone honors my memory. It doesn't. You being alone just means I failed you. It means my death destroyed both of us. But you being alive, really alive, not just breathing, that's how you honor me. By proving that what we had was real enough to survive my absence. By showing that love doesn't end, it just changes shape. She was crying now. I don't know if Nell and Sky and the baby will still be there when you watch this. I don't know if you'll let them stay. That part I couldn't control. That choice is yours. But please, please don't choose the tomb. Don't choose preservation over presence. Don't choose my memory over your future. Choose life, Calder. Even if it's messy and complicated and nothing like what we planned, especially then. Choose life. Because I can't anymore, but you can. The video ended. Calder sat in the dark car, the phone screen glowing in his hand, and felt something fundamental shift inside him. Elena had been right. He had been dying, slowly, deliberately, choosing numbness over feeling because feeling hurt too much. But Nell and Sky and Mira had interrupted that death. They'd broken into his tomb and filled it with noise and mess, and the relentless, uncomfortable reality of other people existing. And he'd hated them for it, and he'd needed them desperately. Pause. The question wasn't whether Elena had manipulated him. She had. The question was whether he'd let that manipulation destroy the one good thing that had happened to him in 4 years. Calder started the car. He drove back through the dark, his mind finally, terrifyingly clear. When he pulled into the driveway, the house was lit, but differently. Not the warm, lived-in glow he'd grown accustomed to. This light was harsh. Overhead lights, every room blazing, the light of people packing. He found Nell in the kitchen, surrounded by boxes. She looked up when he entered. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders were set with the kind of determined exhaustion he recognized. "We'll be out by morning," she said quietly. "I promise." Calder set his keys on the counter. "I watched the video." Nell went still. "The one Elena made. The lawyer included it in the file." "I should have told you about it," Nell said. "I should have. Why didn't you?" She met his eyes. "Because I was afraid. Of losing this. Of you. Of having to start over again. And I know that's selfish. I know that's not an excuse. But it's the truth." Calder nodded slowly. "When did you realize you loved me?" The question seemed to surprise her. "What?" "You heard me?" Nell's face flushed. "I don't—" "Because I think I realized it when Sky had her seizure," Calder continued. "When I was holding her in the car, and I thought I might lose her, and I understood that she'd become mine. That you'd all become mine. And that terrified me more than anything Elena did." Voice cracks. "Because loving you means risking loss again. And I don't know if I'm strong enough for that." Nell's eyes filled with tears. "But I watched Elena's video," Calder continued. "And she said something that broke me. She said being alone doesn't honor her memory. It just means she failed me." "Calder." "I don't want her to have failed me." His voice was raw. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in a tomb. And I think she gave me you because she knew you wouldn't let me." Nell was crying now, fully, silently. "So I have a question," Calder said, "and I need you to answer honestly." "Okay. Do you want to stay? Not because of the trust, not because of Elena's plan, because you want to. You and Sky and Mira. Do you want this to be your home?" Nell's breath caught. "Yes," she whispered. "God, yes." "Then stay." The words hung between them. "I need you to understand," Calder added. "I'm not okay. I'm not fixed. I'm still figuring out how to live again. It's going to be messy and hard, and I'm going to fail at it sometimes. That's okay. And I need time. Before anything. Before we're anything other than what we are now. I need time to grieve properly, to let Elena go, to figure out who I am without her. I can give you time, and I need honesty. Complete honesty. No more secrets, no more strategies. Just truth, even when it's ugly. I can do that." Calder took a breath. "Then stay. Please stay." Nell crossed the kitchen and hugged him. He let her. For the first time in 4 years, he let someone hold him, and he didn't break apart. He just held on. The next morning, Calder made coffee for 4. Sky appeared in the kitchen doorway, cautious and hopeful. "Are we staying?" "Yes." She launched herself at him, nearly knocking him over. He caught her awkwardly, unpracticed at this kind of physicality, but he held her. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," Sky said into his shirt. "About knowing. I wanted to, but Mom said, I know, it's okay." "Are you sure?" He pulled back to look at her. "I'm not angry at you, Sky. I was never angry at you." "But you were hurt." "Yes." He wouldn't lie to her. Not anymore. "I was hurt. But I understand why you did it, and I'm choosing to stay anyway." Sky studied his face with those too perceptive eyes. Then, quietly, "Do you think you'll love us someday?" The question stole his breath. "I think," he said carefully, "I already do. I just need time to figure out what that means." Sky nodded. "That's okay. Love is complicated." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just started noticing." Despite everything, Calder laughed. The weeks that followed were not easy. Calder had told the truth. He wasn't fixed. There were days he couldn't get out of bed. Days he snapped at Nell over nothing. Days he disappeared into his office and didn't emerge until dark. But there were also days he sat with Sky while she did homework. Days he taught Mira to count using Cheerios. Days he and Nell cooked dinner together and talked about things that had nothing to do with grief. Slowly, incrementally, the house became a home. The breaking point came 3 months later. Calder stood outside his bedroom door. Their bedroom door. The one he'd kept locked since Elena's funeral. The room he couldn't bear to enter because it still smelled like her perfume and held all her things exactly as she'd left them. Nell found him there, hand on the doorknob, unable to turn it. "You don't have to," she said gently. "I do." "Why?" "Because I can't move forward if I'm still living in the past." Nell took his hand. "Then let's do it together." They opened the door. The room was exactly as he remembered. Dust-covered, frozen in time. Elena's robe still hanging on the bathroom door, her books still stacked on the nightstand, her reading glasses perched on top. Calder's chest tightened. But it didn't destroy him. It made him sad. Deeply, profoundly sad. But sadness, he was learning, was survivable. "Do you want me to leave you alone?" Nell asked. "No." He squeezed her hand. "Stay." They stood there together, looking at the remnants of his first love, and Calder felt something release in his chest. Permission. Permission to remember without worshiping. Permission to grieve without drowning. Permission to love again without betraying. "She would have liked you," he said finally. Nell smiled. "I know. She chose me." And somehow, that truth no longer felt like manipulation. It felt like a gift. That night, Calder called his lawyer. "I want to amend the trust," he said. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "In what way?" "I want the house to belong to Nell and her daughters. Permanently. No conditions, no time limits. Just theirs." A pause. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "This is irreversible, Calder. Once you do this—" "I know. Do it anyway." "May I ask why?" Calder looked out the window at the yard where Sky was teaching Mira to catch fireflies, at the kitchen where Nell was washing dishes and humming, at the home his wife had died dreaming of, now filled with life she'd never see but had somehow made possible. "Because Elena was right," he said. "This isn't my house anymore. It's theirs. I'm just—" He swallowed. "I'm just lucky they let me stay." The papers were finalized a month later. Calder gathered everyone in the living room, Nell, Sky, Mira, even Marcus, and handed Nell the deed. She stared at it like it might bite her. "What is this?" "Your house. Legally. Permanently. Yours." "Calder, I can't—" "Yes, you can." He held her gaze. "Elena gave me a choice. Stay frozen or choose life. I'm choosing life. And life means giving you this." "But where will you—" "I'm not going anywhere." He smiled. "Unless you want me to." Nell's eyes filled with tears. "Never. Then I'm staying. If you'll have me." "Yes." She was crying openly now. "Yes." Sky, ever practical, looked at him seriously. "Does this mean you're going to marry my mom?" Both adults froze. "Sky," Nell started, but Calder surprised himself by laughing. "Someday, maybe, if she'll have me. But not today." "Why not today?" "Because we're figuring out how to be a family first. The rest can wait." Sky considered this. "Okay, that's fair." The casual acceptance, the idea that they were already a family just working out the details, hit Calder with unexpected force. Because she was right. They were a family. Imperfect, complicated, built on grief and manipulation and impossible choices. But a family nonetheless. 2 years later. Calder woke to the sound of Sky practicing piano. She'd started lessons 6 months ago, haltingly at first, afraid to touch the instrument that had been Elena's. But Calder had encouraged her, had sat with her through the first painful scales, had told her that Elena would have wanted the piano played. Now Sky could manage simple pieces, chopsticks. Mary had a little lamb, and occasionally, when she thought no one was listening, she'd attempt the Chopin nocturne that had been Elena's favorite. Calder lay in bed, the bed he now shared with Nell, and listened to his daughter stumble through a melody. His daughter. He still felt strange calling her that, but less strange every day. "You awake?" Nell murmured beside him. "Yeah. It's Saturday. You could sleep in." "I don't want to miss this." Nell smiled and curled closer. "She's getting good." "She's getting there." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to Sky play, until Mira burst into the room, now 4 years old and full of opinions, demanding pancakes immediately. Life, Calder had learned, was largely about being interrupted by people you loved demanding breakfast. He made pancakes. Sky set the table. Nell poured juice. Mira helped by arranging everyone's silverware in elaborate patterns. It was chaotic, normal, perfect. After breakfast, they worked in the garden, a new addition Elena would have loved, planting vegetables, pulling weeds, Sky narrating the life cycle of earthworms with the intense focus she brought to everything. Later, Calder found himself in the music room, looking at the photo he'd finally hung on the wall. Elena, smiling, beautiful, frozen at the age she'd always be. "Hi," he said quietly. "Just wanted to say thank you." He did this sometimes, talked to her, not because he thought she could hear, but because it felt right to acknowledge the gift she'd given him. Sky played Chopin this morning. Badly. But she tried. I think you'd like that. He paused, imagining what she'd say. "Nell wants to get married next spring. In the garden. Nothing fancy. Just us and a few friends." I said yes. He smiled. "I know you know that already, wherever you are, but I wanted to tell you anyway. You were right about everything, about me, about what I needed, about the fact that love doesn't end, it just changes shape. I miss you, every day, but it doesn't destroy me anymore. And I think that means I'm finally doing what you wanted. I'm living." He touched the frame gently. "Thank you for not letting me turn into a ghost. Thank you for being manipulative and strategic and impossible. Thank you for loving me enough to save me from myself. I hope wherever you are, you know you succeeded." He left the room. Nell was waiting in the hallway. She'd heard him. He could tell by her eyes. "Talking to Elena?" "Yeah." "What did she say?" Calder pulled her close. "That she approves?" "How do you know?" "Because you're here. Because we're here. Because she made this possible." Nell rested her head against his chest. "Do you think she knew how it would turn out?" "I think she hoped. And that was enough." They stood there, holding each other in the house that had been a tomb and become a home, surrounded by the sound of children playing and life continuing and love taking new forms. Outside, Sky had convinced Mira to hunt for frogs in the creek. Inside, Calder and Nell started preparing dinner. And somewhere, in memory, in the walls, in the way light fell through kitchen windows, Elena's presence lingered. Not as a ghost, as a blessing. That night, after the girls were asleep, Calder and Nell sat on the back deck, watching fireflies emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" Nell asked. "Letting us stay? Giving up the house?" Calder thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," he said finally. "But I regret that it took so long, that I wasted so much time being afraid. You weren't ready before. Maybe, but I think I could have been, if I'd chosen to be." Nell took his hand. "We get ready when we get ready. There's no rushing it." "When did you get so wise?" She laughed. "Sky's been teaching me." They sat in comfortable silence. "I love you," Calder said, simply, without preamble. Nell squeezed his hand. "I know. You tell me every day. I want to keep telling you, for the rest of my life." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." Neither was he. For the first time in 6 years, Calder Rowan was exactly where he belonged. Not frozen in the past, not running from the future, just here, present, alive, in a house full of noise and love and the beautiful, messy reality of living. Elena had given him a choice. He'd chosen life, and life, it turned out, had chosen him back. Later, when the fireflies had gone and the night had grown cold, Calder would go inside and check on the girls. Sky would be sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over the side. Mira would be curled into a tight ball, clutching the stuffed bear Elena had bought years ago for a child she'd never meet. He'd stand in their doorway and watch them breathe, these children who'd invaded his tomb and reopened his heart. And he'd feel the weight of impossible gratitude. Then he'd go to his own room, the room he'd once shared with a ghost, and now shared with a woman who knew all his broken places and loved him anyway. And he'd climb into bed beside someone who chose him every single day. And just before sleep took him, he'd think about Elena, about trust and manipulation and love that survived death, about the way grief could transform from weight to wings if you let it, about the fact that sometimes the greatest act of love is engineering your own replacement. Elena had known he'd need saving. She'd known he'd fight it. She'd saved him anyway. And in the morning, when Sky woke him with sticky fingers and demands for pancakes, when Mira's laughter echoed through halls that had been silent too long, when Nell smiled at him over coffee like he was exactly what she'd been waiting for, he'd understand that grief and joy could coexist. That love could take 1,000 forms. That home wasn't a place you returned to. It was a choice you made every single day. And Calder Rowan, finally, after so many years of choosing loss, chose life. If this story moved you, if you felt Calder's grief, Sky's wisdom, or Elena's impossible love, if you've ever had to choose between staying frozen in the past or risking your heart again, then leave a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in Calder's position? Would you have let them stay? Would you have fought your wife's plan? Or would you have done exactly what he did, taken the hardest, most terrifying path toward healing? I read every comment, and your story matters. Hit that like button if this story reminded you that love doesn't end, it just changes shape. Subscribe if you want more stories that don't just entertain, but stay with you long after they're over. And share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to start again. That choosing life after loss isn't betrayal. It's the bravest thing you can do. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, home isn't a place you return to. It's a choice you make every single day.